All right, welcome into another episode of the 2022 MLB Draft Show. And today we got another special episode. We've got the Boston Red Sox Director of Amateur Scouting, Paul Toboni, joining us. Paul's been at this for almost a decade. He brings a lot of experience coming from different markets, and really excited to talk to Paul. Paul, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, Joe. Thanks for having me, man.
I want to rewind a little bit. I want to go back to kind of your origins in this industry, and that started in Oakland. I know you only spent 6 months to a year there, but back in those days, especially, Oakland was renowned for having kind of a unique way of going about evaluating amateur talent. And I just want to know what you have been able to take from your brief time in Oakland towards the acceleration of your career ever since.
Yeah, shoot, I wasn't really in Oakland for long. I was in between my first and second years of graduate school, and so I think it was a 4-month internship or so. And really, what I took from it was just being exposed to a bunch of really great people, be it through the draft room or just in the front office, and really being a fly on the wall and soaking up really anything I could. Both in just, conversations that took place in the draft room and also in the one-off conversations on the side. I think back to that room and people I think very highly of to this day. And I'm just thinking of Eric Kubota and Michael Holmes and those type of people that were in that room, and probably didn't mean a ton for them at the time to have some of those conversations. But at the time for me, it meant the world. So really more than anything, just grateful to have had that experience. And then it served as a great jumping off point, hopping over to the Red Sox, a little bit more time later. So
was there an event or an instance, something that you learned in that first draft with Oakland that you can say, this is not something that I expected to be a wrinkle in the draft room, that I expected to be part of the draft process? Was there something that kind of sticks out for you?
I think like in both the naive and immature mind of Paul Toboni at the time, I think what I was kind of dumbfounded by was, I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure a lot of those scouts actually played themselves in Moneyball. And so I was kind of sitting there with my jaw on the table, just like, wow, I recognize some of these guys, or I recognize their voices from the movies or whatever it might be. And then, so I think more than anything, that was kind of what captured my mind at the time. But it was actually the draft that Oakland took Billy McKinney in the first round. And I think I was really just captured by the lingo of, how they talk through players. And I was pretty fresh from playing collegiately. And so, I knew some of the players from playing, and just hearing the scouts break them down. And, I think that's where my interest in scouting first really jumped off.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's kind of talk about your experience in evaluation and scouting. You've been doing this, like I said, for about a decade. Do you consider yourself to have any specific pillars when it comes to evaluating players? Is there, because you come from a bit of a new school approach on scouting, I think. Is there something that immediately draws your eye when you're looking at a player's profile?
Truth be told, I'm at a high level, at least, I'm not sure a ton has changed from the old school days, of scouting, from dollar sign on the muscle and all that. Like, I really don't think a ton has changed in terms of the pillars of our evaluations. Broadly speaking, just we like, middle of the field players that can hit, and generally they're pretty good athletes and can provide value defensively. And, I guess running parallel with that, I think what has changed is how we go about assessing risk in each of those different profiles, right? And I think we've, just because of, the access to crazy amounts of information and just how the world's changed in so many ways, I think that's natural, right? So for the most part, I think that the core principles of what we value have remained the same. And when it hasn't remained the same, I think you can trace a lot of that back to coming to understand what maybe we're not great at evaluating, right? I think it's like the Daryl Morey quote, right? It's be a person who knows his own mind well enough to mistrust it, right? I think if we're really honest with ourselves and we said, hey, in the 80s or the 90s, we valued this way and this is why, or we evaluated this way and this is why it didn't work. That's an opportunity to grow and evolve and get better. And we do our best to try and take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not evolving, you're not getting better. That's for sure. I do want to ask what it's been like bringing Chaim Bloom into the fold, because he comes from such a analytics side, or I should say an analytics narrative surrounds kind of his aura with his time with the Rays. So I'd like to know, since he's come on with the Red Sox, how has that changed your job? How's it made it easier? Has it made it more difficult? What sort of insight has he brought to kind of your day-to-day gig?
I think more so than anything, he's just been a terrific resource in terms of just asking questions and not necessarily even giving like really strong opinions, but throwing questions back at you that maybe indirectly but directly kind of force you to think about some things that you might not be valuing correctly. And at a minimum, I think it's maybe just it results in a good thought exercise to figure out if we should be thinking about things in different ways. I think not just with Chaim and Tampa Bay and what they're doing, but just with the, this injection of analytics and over the past however many years, I think in many ways it's made our jobs a lot easier, right? Because there's so much information that is readily accessible that carries predictive weight, right? And that's obviously a really good thing. But at the same time, I think there's this burden to make use of that information because there's a ton of it, right? And
it's paralyzing.
And it makes the process a little bit more complex, and that's totally okay, right? I think we have to, accept that and grow with it. And we face many issues now that require significant work that traditionally we haven't had to worry about, right? But what comes with that work, hopefully, is a more refined, hopefully more accurate final product or evaluation on a player.
Is there a way that you specifically like to implement analytics and data? Because I know the further you go down that rabbit hole, like you said, the further it can kind of muddle what you're trying to achieve. Personally, I think there's two ways of going about it. You can use it at the front end where it can help you identify guys to take a closer look at, or you can use it at the back end to help kind of qualify what your eyes are seeing. Kind of where do you like to fit it into the evaluation process? Is it here's a scouting report, a live look of a guy, we saw 8 at-bats, we saw 2 games, and then you send that over to the data analysts? Or how do you weigh those two sides of the scouting pool?
I think it works in tandem with our scouts and all the scouting reports coming in really throughout the whole process, right? So the work that our R&D group does, the work of Dan Meyer and Joe McDonald and Jimmy O'Donnell and others, it's really, I've said this before on other platforms, but it's really the engine that drives our evaluation process. And I think it can get as granular as really diving into an individual player and digging into some part of their profile, be it their athletic assessments or their pitch data or their batted ball data, whatever it is, and coming to a conclusion based on information that is provided in those areas, right? Or it can be as macro as, hey, how do you put the board together, right? And the way we did it 15 years ago, is that the right way to do it? And maybe how can we lean on some things analytically that will put us in a better jumping off process or jumping off spot than maybe we had it before, right? So, I think as long as it's injected responsibly and we're comfortable on this journey of constantly revising and improving, should it need revision and improvement, which in my opinion, it always should, right? I think we're always going to be in a pretty good spot.
I want to ask you a behind the curtain question in terms of what day 2 looks like of the draft. As you get into that 4th, 5th, 6th round, and the difference between guys on your board gets marginally smaller and smaller and smaller, how far before your pick actually comes up? Do you have a pretty good feel for, what guy you want to target? Or, does it get to the point where you're on the clock and, you decide between 3 names that are kind of at the top?
Yeah. So, I think it should make sense, right? That the farther the draft goes along, the higher the likelihood that the player, when you're, X amount of players out, should reach your pick, right? But
Mhm.
um, typically we try and be over prepared, and I think we have a number of different people making calls to advisors and the kids, just to check in and make sure they are hopefully willing to sign with a signing bonus that we can provide, and then from there we just hope for the best, and with the understanding that I think what you said is accurate, where the delta between players at that point in the draft really isn't as significant as it would be in the first or second round.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about 2020 and 2021. I thought you guys came away with a huge haul. 2020, I thought was a masterwork, to be honest with you. I thought Jordan and Nick Yorke was an excellent, excellent way of maneuvering around the flexibility and the resources that you were provided. And Marcelo Mayer, falling into your lap there. What a good get. Talk to me a little bit about those two drafts. How do you feel about them, a year or two removed now, kind of from a bird's eye view?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, we feel pretty good. I don't think you can ultimately judge these drafts in this small of a time horizon, right? But
Sure.
I do think, kind of a thought exercise that we go through. We like to put ourselves in the headspace that if Nick Yorke is a good example. If Nick Yorke were to be eligible for the 2023 draft, right, out of the University of Arizona, right, where's he going, right? And that difference between, let's say he's set to go in the top 5 or 10 picks, and pick 17, where we were able to access him in 2020, right? That's significant, right? And so the more precise we can be in identifying what player traits lead to this kind of value being captured in the moment, right? We throw that phrase around a lot, just trying to capture value in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think the more refined we can be with our predictions in terms of what the traits are that can lead us to doing that, what type of player profiles and that sort of thing, the better. And that's where the majority of our bandwidth is devoted over the course of the year in figuring out what drives that value. And you know what? It goes without saying, too, that we don't often pick in that area of the draft, say for last year with Marcelo.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we can't access talent that fits there, right? We just have to work really hard and work intelligently and really to identify the traits where, inefficiencies might lie within the industry, and then not missing the player when hopefully that player is available at our pick, right? So,
Yeah. So
I
keep
should
those
add,
preps.
I'm sorry.
That's the key with those preps. Yeah, kind of forecasting where they're going to be, 700, 900 days later.
Totally. And I think, just speaking for the rest of the staff too, I think my assumption is that Scott Hunter or Brian Bridges said the same thing or something similar, but I think our staff gets just as much enjoyment out of capturing value in the picks that come a little bit later. Obviously their stories haven't been told, but the Daniel McIlvaney's and the Hunter Dobbins and those cats that have been taken after the 5th round, and just tracking them and kind of seeing how their careers play out going forward. That's always a fun thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say ultimately the value within your farm system and your organization is built in rounds 3 through 10 more so than it is built at the top. More slices at the apple, if you will. Well, let's talk about the last 7 or 8 years. So you've had the chance to go see thousands of players live, or probably close to it. Is there a guy that sticks out as just being really, truly a special talent, someone that maybe opened your eyes than other players maybe haven't?
Sure. I think, the first player that comes to mind, and obviously biased here because he's part of our organization. He's coming off a pretty good Arizona Fall League, but I think Tristan Casas is definitely one of those players for me. This was Mike Rickard leading that draft, who did a terrific job. But I think, most when asked that question refer back to maybe the unique raw power of a prospect, or crazy athleticism, or the velocity, whatever it might be. For Casas, for me, while he did have that unique, like top of the scale raw power as an amateur, what I always refer back to is just how good of an understanding he had of how to hit, given his age. And maybe what's crazier is you think, shoot, wow, this kid is already really advanced and views the game through a professional lens at 17 years old. But then you fast forward 3 or 4 years to the present day, and he's taken it to a different level. And I think there are a relatively high number of kids that possess these crazy, physical tool sets, right? But to pair that with the neurological ability to, what it takes to be a really good hitter, but then also to layer on this genuine obsession to be great, and this understanding of kind of what it takes to be really good, and what goes into being a really good hitter. That is so rare in my opinion. And I think Tristan was, one of the few that I've come across in the last, 5+ years that it was truly obvious when you had that conversation with him that he was genuinely obsessed.
Yeah, his not to keep using the word genuine, but his genuine frustration around winning a silver medal, I thought was really endearing. You just don't find a guy that, is so frustrated with the fact that they didn't take home gold. I found that to be really unique. We got a kid out here in Seattle named Jared Kelnick who's kind of wired the same way. Just it's all or nothing all the time, all gas, no brakes. And I think that can take you a long ways. We'll kind of leave you with this, Paul. 2022 draft is around the corner. It's awfully early. We're nine months away. What are some narratives that you're seeing in this class? What are some, kind of macro level things that you're seeing from this 2022 crop of kids?
It seems to be a pretty strong class from a high school pitching perspective. But then I think, we've also had a lot more exposure to the high school kids, right? And I think partly because, they didn't play as freshmen or didn't play the whole season as freshmen. But also with the draft being pushed back, we didn't have a great process with the Cape and with Team USA and that sort of thing. I think there's going to be this huge push for college players to be shooting up boards as the spring progresses, just because, I don't think we're in the same spot as we've been in recent years in terms of understanding who the best players are and where exactly they fit. But you know what? Like, it goes back to that Daryl Morey quote that I threw out earlier in this, right? Like, we can give this opinion now on November 23rd or whatever the date is, right? But it's going to be totally flipped on its head come April, May, and June. And that's what's so fun about this process and just being a part of the amateur scouting world.
Yeah, I think you do this long enough and you realize attaching superlatives to a kid any further out than 3 months from the draft is a futile exercise because everything changes. Absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining the show, man. I know that I can speak for our viewers and listeners. They're going to take a lot away from this, and you've been killing it the last few years, man. Really excited to see what you guys do in 2022. Keep up the good work.
Of course, Joe. Thanks for having me on, and good luck with everything going forward.